So do you remember Viva Piñata? The little mid-2000s franchise about a bunch of sentient piñatas who really love to party? My partying days are way behind me at this point, so of course I'm going to live vicariously through this franchise. Just to, you know, feel something again. Viva Piñata sits in this interesting bubble of both being known for the video games as well as the TV series. One didn't really spark the other, as from the beginning, both were being made in tandem to help jumpstart this franchise with a whole bunch to offer across both markets. With how most things were in the early to mid 2000s, trying to launch and build franchises that could extend to different formats all at once was all the rage. So it wasn't uncommon to see these immediate franchise hopefuls drop and act like one, rather than starting off as a singular venture property and going on from there. Surprisingly though, while many probably remember the first video game being where they were first introduced to Viva Piñata, some can say the same for the TV series, as the TV series ended up coming out first by a couple of months. Today we are going to take a look into the franchise of Viva Piñata, both the TV series and the video games. We're going to understand how it all came together thanks to Microsoft, Rare, and 4Kids Entertainment. We're gonna get to know what it was truly all about, as well as what happened to it in the end. All of that and more right now. Let's get this party started. Maybe one of the first questions that you have is, why are the animals piñatas anyway? Well, it wasn't the original plan, but it just kind of happened a bit randomly. A lot of the history of Viva Piñata seems to be like this, where ideas, concepts, and turning everything into what the franchise would be as a whole all stemmed from just kind of figuring things out as they go, rather than really having a solid plan for what they were all making, at least outside of the main video game. Taking the time to see how these little ideas and concepts became what Viva Piñata eventually was shows you two sides of the gaming and entertainment industry, where we can view the process from the creative side of things as well as from the side of big business with the push for an instant franchise, essentially. To take a look from the actual first conception of this idea before it even was Viva Piñata, we have to go back to around 2002.
You're watching Viva Piñata. Viva Piñata!
This is Tim Stamper, one of the two co-founding brothers of Rare, the legendary video game developer that basically helped cement these important core gaming memories from the 1990s and early 2000s because of games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, Battletoads, Perfect Dark, GoldenEye 007, Killer Instinct, heck, all of these Donkey Kong games, and so much more. The list of games they were responsible for is downright unbelievable, and they were mainly making all of these titles for Nintendo's line of home consoles, as well as their handheld offerings throughout this period. In 2002, Tim wrote a 6-page document that was essentially wanting to figure out how to capture a unique way to observe nature through his examples of noticing certain animals and insects in his own garden, and wanting to figure out what he would need to do in order to have more of them appear. What would that require of him to have to do to get that result? And that's where this whole ball started getting rolled. So a very small team would start working on ideas to make whatever this game would be, having you start with only a singular seed, and through playing and managing this virtual garden, you'd eventually have it filled with a bunch of animals or insects and more. Despite their work with Nintendo, they weren't really looking to Nintendo when it came to discussing this idea. One, for it being such a small idea with a small team behind it at the time, and two, for the fact that they envisioned this for a more mobile setting, specifically for a Microsoft-made device called the Pocket PC, which was a PDA, or a personal digital assistant. These were really big around this time in the weird era before cell phones became smartphones. I feel disgustingly old just saying that. And now this meme really captures 2002 for Rare, where Microsoft is walking by and they start getting more interested in speaking with them. But okay, it's not fully like this because Nintendo was more so not really showing the love to Rare. It didn't feel like they cared what Rare was gonna do, as they could have at any time purchased more ownership within the company or even full-on bought them out to have them as an exclusive game studio, but instead chose not to. Surprising Rare that they didn't do anything more. So now, when a new opportunity comes knocking, an opportunity that comes with $375 million, Rare would take it, with Microsoft announcing on September 24th, 2002 at their XO2 Europe event that they have successfully reached a deal with Rare to acquire them as an in-house developer. So aside from the intellectual properties that Microsoft would now be getting, like Perfect Dark, they would also be getting something new. Something small, but just like how it would be in the game, it would grow into something a lot more expansive. This little garden management management game went from development on Microsoft's Pocket PC to then being worked on for their Xbox home console and eventually shifting once more to their next home console, the Xbox 360. Microsoft, though, would see something very specific in this idea that they wanted to heavily capitalize on by the time it would be ready, and that's its potential. Microsoft were the latest ones in town to have home consoles, and with their newest one, they were really banking on the Xbox 360 being a massive hit for all ages. But they knew they needed more console-exclusive staples at the time that they could get gamers more invested in investing into their newest product, or getting their parents invested for them. One thing that really gave them plenty of hope for having something that could possibly aid in the efforts of this was seeing what Viva Piñata was becoming, and wanting to get more hands-on, so much so that all of a sudden there was a lot more pressure to get this game out and to make sure that it was first and foremost something kid-friendly. The point that really made things click for Microsoft, and seeing all the progress being made, was the look of the animals in the game. As they wouldn't just be animals, they'd have style to them, as they would all now be piñatas. But why? Well, concept artist Ryan Stevenson, who was working on this project, would be the one who would bring up the idea of going with a piñata look to all of the animals based on it being very colorful and standing out as unique, but also for the fact that since Rare was based in England, piñatas were not something specifically seen super often there, so it was exciting to all of them to play around with that look. Plus, it led to plenty more concepts that we see in the games and the show, making use out of the fact that there is candy inside of the piñatas. Now, it's not like Microsoft looked at what they had here and directly said, "Wow, what if we made this our Pokemon?" But it's not what they said, as this was quickly seen as franchise potential. Just a little less of a naturally built one, as all of these other avenues aside from the video game itself would need to start happening as well, leading to the video game itself needing to hit tighter deadlines to make sure that the video game was ready for its release by the end of 2006. The other side of things for Viva Piñata was already in effect, as Microsoft was already taking this new property of theirs to meet with the people who already were bringing stuff like Pokemon to the US, with that being 4Kids TV. And after seeing the piñata look and understanding the basis of what it's about and the freedom that they would have for the most part in their field of animation, they told Microsoft that, after looking at all Microsoft gave them to choose from, and I'm talking like a bunch of different properties here to turn into a cartoon, that they wanted specifically to turn Viva Piñata into an animated series over anything else. And thus, this was now your basic structure to have a franchise, as both the show and the games were being developed at the same time, and even working with one another when it came to Rare sharing their in-game models and assets with 4Kids in order for them to create the show. There really wasn't any interference between the two mediums where one side would want one thing and the other side wouldn't. In fact, game designer Justin Cook mentioned in an interview that they are separate things. Early on, we decided that Rare knows games and should try to make the best game they can. 4Kids knows about TV, so we should let them make the best show they could. So while the game would be developed with the player in mind, kind of playing God and setting things up to happen, the TV series would have to have characters defined with personalities, plot lines, and more that were completely their own separate thing. Like I mentioned earlier, this series would be the first thing to come out for the Viva Piñata franchise, as the video game was still being worked on to have ready for the 2006 holiday season. So with time running out for their deadlines, the first Viva Piñata game may not have fully been the finished and polished game that Rare originally envisioned.
You're watching Viva Piñata. Now back to Viva Piñata.
So while the TV series did originally come out first, premiering in August of 2006, I feel it's only right to talk about the first Viva Piñata game before getting into the TV series. On November 9th, 2006, Viva Piñata was officially released as an Xbox 360 exclusive that would have a bit of notoriety from being a game developed by Rare, which really only appealed to those who knew specifically the previous work Rare had done on Nintendo's platforms, as well as thanks to the show coming out a few months beforehand, which may or may not have been the best idea, but we'll get to that later in the video. Either way, it was this bright and vivid world where you are in control of helping look after and full-on nurture a garden on Piñata Island. The more you do for taking care of your island and shaping it up in nice and unique ways, the more piñatas will show up and become a part of the ecosystem, much like the original vision Tim wanted. So it's cool that the base concept never really left. You start off the game with very little, like only just a shovel, before you start getting access to some seeds that you can plant and a water watering can to help them grow in order to really get things going. This will then allow you to have visiting wild piñata animals come check out the garden with you having to maintain both the garden itself and the needs of the piñatas in order to have the place up to their standard and their direct specific needs met so that you can have them officially join the garden itself to become a resident of it instead of just a visiting wild creature. It sounds simple enough, but the more piñatas that end up there and the larger your garden gets, you start to bring in more and more complications to worry about. Stuff like piñatas not getting along with other piñatas, or dealing with the antagonistic characters of the game, the ruffians and the sour piñatas. The ruffians are these little minion-like characters sent to cause some chaos for you to deal with from the main big bad, I'm saying that in quotes, of the series, Professor Pester. The ruffians will try to mess up your garden, make life for the piñatas there awful, leave toxic candy around that will poison the piñatas, and overall, they'll probably just break some stuff. You either let them just do what they were planning to do in order for them to leave, or you have to bribe them, have other specific characters or items to scare them off, or you can just beat them up with your shovel once it's been upgraded. It's not useful, but it's fun. For the sour piñatas, well, they show up to cause more sour attitudes to spread around, having a darker color palette and more menacing look to them, as you will need to figure out the requirements and methods needed to tame them. As you progress in the game itself, it really starts feeling like a garden, you know? You can get little upgrades and decorations through the use of the in-game chocolate coin currency, you can hire more helpers to work in the garden, and you'll have to deal with the bad guys as if they were real-life pests trying to ruin your garden. Plus, the circle of life happens. Piñatas will die, get eaten, or you may have to let some of them go in order to get other piñatas you may want in your garden. Also, they can, you know, when two piñatas like each other very much, they can do the romance dance in order to produce offspring. This romance dance was a little system that Rare came up with in order to help keep this aspect of the game in the game and still keep it to the rules that Microsoft had for them, which was being kid-friendly no matter what. So instead of, well, you know, we instead get these little dancing ritual moments for all of the different types of piñatas, where after you first meet the mating requirements for each piñata, then build them a house, then bring them both together, and then get through a minigame. It's a lot of work. But in doing all of this, then you get to the romance dance where then you can receive an egg. There's a lot to do, a lot to manage, but overall, a lot to love. You can really feel how much passion was put into this game from Rare. But this passion was a bit held back, and I'll get to why in just a minute here. Like I said, Microsoft has had a lot of faith in what Viva Piñata could be, claiming that regardless of other big video game releases in 2006 for the Xbox 360 like Gears of War, which only came out 2 days before this game did, Viva Piñata is of equal importance to them, with the property of it automatically coming out as a technical franchise that they had high hopes for all around. At the end of the day, this is a simulator game, so there is a bit of a niche to it that not everyone would be wanting out of it, but it serves the crowd of those who love to wind down at the end of the day with something a bit more chill and relaxing, but still does have its own fair share of stresses. Like heck, I love Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, stuff like that, right? I consider those cozy, relaxing games to chill out to, but they can get so stressful as well at some points. And that element of these type of games is here as well in Viva Piñata. What I was trying to say is that the game would have less of a wide mass appeal because the game wouldn't be for all of the other types of gamers out there. But please remember this point for later on, because the popularity of these simulation style games would drastically continue to go up and be a lot different in modern day. And there was still a decent amount of gamers back then who enjoyed games like this. Like for real, I swear, so many people I knew owned this special edition version of the game that came in this really cool curved at the top tri-fold packaging. The Minions did something similar with its Blu-ray Steelbook release. Ugh, this one haunts me. It's like staring into my soul. While Viva Piñata would sell pretty well for all things considered, it was technically just on par with the expectations and projections put on the game initially. As this should have been seen as a win, those who were making the game at Rare did feel a bit unhappy with the final state of the game that it was released in. They felt it was unfinished and had to rush and cut a lot of stuff out to meet the release date. So after the game's release, what could they do? They had all these leftover ideas, with some of them already halfway developed. Could they just turn it into some sort of DLC for the game to release half a year later? Or is there something more that they could do with this? Well, they looked at all that they had worked on and said to themselves, we can make what Viva Piñata is into the full game we originally saw it as when developing it. Let's spend the time creating a definitive version of the game that can fit the mold of a sequel technically, and fully implement and flesh out so many more things about it. Thus, Rare began work on the next Viva Piñata game, and no, I'm not talking about the technical next one that was released the following year in 2007. But we will get back to the gaming side of things here shortly. For now, we must take a look at the TV series for Viva Piñata and how 4Kids was handling everything that way.
Up next, Viva Piñata!
Viva Piñata!
Viva Piñata, the animated series version of the property, would be produced by 4Kids and would premiere on August 26th, 2006 on the 4Kids TV programming block on Fox. Now, in comparing things to what the games would be, the series here very much has the same look and aesthetic of it, naturally, as to keep everything in line, but it's so different for the fact that the Piñata animals can all speak now, having these distinct personalities and some lore given to them for the whole Piñata factor of the designs. It's a typical setup for all of these characters living on the island, for them getting into shenanigans and taking in day by day whatever happens, with some occasional pestering from Professor Pester being the antagonist here as well. Now, the big and honestly kind of messed up thing is that these are piñatas, right? So to take stuff from the games and incorporate some more depth into that, we see in the show that they can eat candy up until they are full, where they are then launched from these cannons to get sent to parties across the world where, yes, they are beaten open and destroyed for their candies inside. Brutally, gruesomely, whatever word I can use to describe it, it's messed up, and I think a lot of them just kind of like it. Because it's all good though, they come back beaten up or in pieces just to be repaired to be as good as new and repeat the cycle again over and over. They are literally party animals. Remember that term, it'll come back up in a bit. In the show, we get to meet a whole bunch of characters, like Hudson Horstachio, Fergie Fudgehog, Polly Pretztail, Franklin Fizzy Bear, Ella Vanilla, and my favorite, Tina and Teddington Twinger Snap. They're like a twin-headed snake type of thing. All we really do throughout the series is kind of follow them all around, as well as meet and see other piñatas as they get into everyday hijinks. The other main thing, which was a pretty interesting and I guess realistic for this unrealistic setting type of thing, with that being having Fergie and Polly not wanting to go to these parties to get beaten up or flat out destroyed, with Fergie specifically being truly terrified of them, as we have the character of Langston Licktoad, who's the one who deals with sending the piñatas to the parties, always trying to go after and get the two of them to send them to one. I just think it's kind of a cool dynamic to build in that not every piñata just accepts or understands this way of life, whether being afraid of it or feeling like it's a bother to go and do. Now, like I mentioned, Justin Cook said that Rare would focus on making the best game that they could, while 4Kids would focus on making the best show that they could, with neither of them getting in each other's way. As time would go on with this other Viva Piñata game being worked on by Rare, they started incorporating a few things from the TV show now, since it had been going on, as the series would have a bit of a focus on Professor Pester and his evil antics, leading the game to incorporate some more plotline elements for his character. There's not a whole lot going on for what the show offers outside of it being in this Viva Piñata world, and that's not to say it's fully bad or anything, it's just that the series feels very generic when it comes to the majority of the storylines presented, with the occasional episode here and there standing out for being a little more out there. While I do think that the main focus of the series does become a little too much of Fergie and by extension Polly having to deal with not being sent out to a party to be massacred for the candy inside of them, I do appreciate following them around, with Fergie honestly being the real main character of the series. Hudson is built up to be the main character, but since his character is this ultra cool celebrity type of character, it's only right to have him seem like he would have been, or even just to himself, like he's the main character, while in reality it's this little dude who would never want to go to a party, whereas Hudson is the king of them. The series itself ended up lasting for 52 episodes or 104 segments across 2 seasons, coming to an end in January of 2009, which when you think about it, makes the TV series the first and last thing to come from this franchise, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll give it this, for a show that really only had the basics of here's the look of the show, character designs, and a basic premise, they did a good enough job adapting what they had into an actual series that some people may even remember more so than the games, with it being placed right along other big shows on 4Kids at the time like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kirby right Right Back At Ya, Sonic X, Winx Club, and many other series. They even had a fun celebration for the day it was released, premiering 2 episodes right away. Plus, because this is for kids, you have Dan Green voicing Hudson. It's just Yami Yugi here, but you know, if he was like a cool party horse. Eric Stewart is there too, don't worry, he just sounds like this, rather than any of these guys. And you'll find several recognizable voices, all of which are mainly shared between anything 4Kids had their hands a part of. It wasn't long after the show premiered that 4Kids would start figuring out other licensing avenues for the property. 4Kids had already worked out toy deals with Playmates Toys and continued to expand through other more on-brand ventures, like having Unique Industries work on a line of actual Viva Piñata piñatas, with Deco Pack working on special cake decorations and even having full-on costumes of the characters and more made by Ruby's Costumes. If that's not on brand, I don't know what is. Now, in saying all this, did the Viva Piñata toys ever officially get made? No, but we did get these 2007 Burger King Viva Piñata toys, so, you know, that's something at least. Well, what about the on-brand stuff like I just mentioned? Surely those had to have come out, right? When it comes to the costumes and actual piñatas, it seems like they never really did happen, but who knows? Because on the surface, it kind of looks like there was never any of these cake decorations made by Deco Pack either, but then what is this eBay listing here? Or even this one, where we can see that they were officially made cake toppers by Deco Pack. So if you have either $300 or even $500, you know where to find them if you want one. We can have somewhat of a look at the other stuff and other ideas, thanks to the concepts that were being made or were being planned to be produced as promotional factors for the franchise, from how a full-on piñata costume would work, as well as getting to see concept artist Ryan Stevenson taking his work and seeing how well it translated to an actual piñata, making it all himself. So at least we can have somewhat of a visual to see what official costumes and piñatas would, or I guess could, have looked like. But for now, that is enough about 4Kids and the series. Let's take things back to Microsoft for the video game side of things and learn about what happened to the franchise.
All new episode of Viva Piñata.
Now, back to Viva Piñata.
Viva Piñata is supposed to be a franchise now, right? So while Rare is working on the main game and the follow-up game to it, Microsoft thought, hey, why not a spin-off game in the meantime? Viva Piñata Party Animals was the next game in the franchise to release, coming out on October 30th, 2007. What's scarier than it coming out the day before Halloween is that it's not that great of a video game, at least in my opinion. Rather than being made by Rare, this game would be developed by Chrome Studios, and was already in production since the summer of 2006, meaning Rare was already busy still working on the first Viva Piñata game, and Microsoft already wanted the ball rolling on more titles in the series, with this one being a game that takes the style of the last game and has them play in the style of another game, a completely different type of game. So no longer are we micromanaging our gardens, instead we're playing mini games. Yeah, it is essentially just Mario Party, albeit here it was themed as more of a game show setting, which I think the newest Mario Party just added with their Switch 2 version of the game. Interesting. Anyway, here, things were more so based on the show rather than what was going on in the original game, bringing in the characters from the show and their personalities. If anything, it was a smart enough effort to try tying things into the show a bit more. As you compete in the game, your goal is to earn the most candy by the end of the last challenge in order to be the winner of it all, which is the same type of stuff like coins and stars in Mario Party. There are a bunch of races, tons of mini games that teeter in quality and similarity, and overall, the important main characters from the show to pick from to play as are here for the most part, but it's pretty limited at 8 characters. 4 if you want to be technical though. While Rare weren't the ones to make this game, they did however share stuff like artwork, assets, and all of that, but they were basically hands-off completely. Now, when it comes to a spin-off game like this where it's just a random assortment of minigames built around a premise of one person winning at the end, they most times feel earned, as the characters would be established for some time and everyone is eager to pick their favorite character to play as, and even if the game isn't the best like some of the Mario parties have been, at least there is Mario and his whole world of characters to play with. Going with a party-style game for your second gaming outing in a new franchise is a bold move, with it being one that didn't really pay off in the end. It only may have made things worse. It received mostly middling to negative reviews, except from official Xbox magazine, but like, come on. In the end, Viva Piñata Party Animals would end up only selling a fourth of what the original game did at the time. While that game didn't have the impact impact Microsoft was looking and hoping for. All of the work Rare had been up to since the release of the first game was finally ready to come to fruition and be released to the world. Viva Piñata: Trouble in Paradise, the direct sequel to the first game, released on September 2nd, 2008. And maybe direct sequel isn't the right term. While some people would consider referring to this game as Viva Piñata 2, it honestly is more of a complete or a definitive version of the first game. Now just with all of the extra bits that they wanted to work on more and polish, along with a ton of new implemented features. There is enough new here to consider it a sequel. I won't take that away from it. It still very much is a different game from the first game, but it makes you not want to, or frankly need to, play the original game anymore. It simply replaces it because at its core, it's the same style of game, same setup, same gameplay, just a bunch of new things to do. The goal of Rare for this game was to make the full definitive version that they wanted the original to be, and to that, they achieved it. While it ended up having all of these improvements and a whole bunch of new things to do and explore, it was still seen as more of an expansion to the first game than anything. It was in this weird middle ground of being new enough, but also not new enough for everyone to really get it. What they did end up adding to Trouble in Paradise were, of course, a bunch of new piñatas, a couple of new areas to go and explore and find new piñatas, as well as a creative mode to fully play around with called Just for Fun, for you to put together your garden however you want with no pressure and not having to worry about earning the in-game currency to afford what you'd like, and without having to deal with any of the bad guys messing things up. A lot of other additions were for quality of life, fixing a few things that were pointed out from the previous game to fix here on a technical level for how the game runs, as well as some in-game aesthetics. In the end, when it comes to sales, Viva Piñata: Trouble in Paradise would end up doing better than Party Animals did, but still selling right under half of what the first game did at the time. For making a franchise happen, these aren't the results you'd want to see, but this wasn't their last attempt at capturing some part of the market to see if this franchise has anything more left to give, with that last game being Viva Piñata: Pocket Paradise, which released right under a week later from Trouble in Paradise on September 8th, 2008 for the Nintendo DS. This wasn't the case of Microsoft pushing the development of this game onto another studio to make while Rare does something else. No, Rare themselves were the ones to develop Pocket Paradise. Now, they had already done some continuing work with Nintendo thanks to them having a handheld gaming development side of their studio, and that's where we would see Diddy Kong Racing DS even come from in the first place. But this Microsoft game made its way over to the DS because they felt it made sense, and the developers somehow were able to just make it work, and I'll explain that part in just a moment. Shane Kim, the at the time head of Microsoft Game Studios, was already praising Viva Piñata, where before it had even come out, he claimed it to be the most important franchise in the portfolio. And in 2007, he would continue to back the franchise into other avenues, like claiming that it would make sense that some properties that they have, especially one like Viva Piñata, would be great and just make sense for the Nintendo DS. Later in 2007 at San Diego Comic-Con, Viva Piñata: Pocket Paradise would officially be announced as an upcoming Nintendo DS title that brings the gardening fiesta to the handheld platform. Now, how did Rare get it to work on something like the DS when they originally struggled to get the game to fully do everything they wanted and run well enough on a more powerful piece of technology at the time, the Xbox 360? When the core team of Rare who were working on the console version of the game were finished, they were now having to face the task of making basically the same thing but for the DS. They then decided to hand it over to their internal handheld team and just let it be for them to kind of figure out and see if they could do anything with it, kind of forgetting about it as they would be working on Trouble in Paradise, and obviously other Rare properties. What, you think I wasn't gonna say Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts once in this video? Anyway, then a few months later, to the shock of everyone, the handheld team returns to them with a feature-complete version of Viva Piñata that can fully run no problem on the DS, all compacted in for it to work. Now, of course, the game itself looks a bit different thanks to the more slightly angled top-down view with 2D graphics instead of 3D graphics, and maybe even 2.5D graphics. It's hard to tell if the models of the characters are truly three-dimensional or just designed to look like they are, but yeah, this game looks incredible for what they accomplished. It only plays slightly different from the original Viva Piñata game due to the console it's on, but what it did have were a few tweaks that the handheld team were able to squeak in there, including bringing in features like a playground mode that would be very much like the Trouble in Paradise Just for Fun mode, which was the creative mode I mentioned for that game. The main Rare team was insanely impressed at this, and it ended up selling slightly better than Trouble in Paradise, but come on, it's the Nintendo DS we're talking about. Nearly anything would do well on there, so it's not surprising. This kind of all feels full circle though, right? The last Viva Piñata game ends up releasing releasing on a handheld console and having the word Pocket in its name. And even on top of that, it's not even on the Xbox or anything specifically from Microsoft, it's on a Nintendo-made handheld. Kind of funny how things in the world just work out like that sometimes. The reviews for it were pretty good as well, making things not look too bad for what Microsoft would want to do for the future of the franchise, right? Well, not really, as after this, that was it for Viva Piñata. Pocket Paradise was the last video game to release for the franchise, and only a handful of months later, in January of 2009, the TV show would come to an end as well. Was this truly the end for Viva Piñata?
You're watching Viva Piñata. Now back to Viva Piñata.
You'd think that there could be more left to give here from Microsoft. I mean, like, they called this the best and most important thing in their entire portfolio. So knowing all that, what the heck happened? If we want to look at where Rare was after making Trouble in Paradise, they just didn't have the direction for it. It needed something completely new or more ideas that were never used, but they simply didn't have that. I think if we were to do another Viva Piñata game, we would have to look at it and see where we're going to take it next. I don't think we could do the same again and evolve it into yet another definitive version, because I don't think there would be enough material. We would have to take a few steps back, maybe look at what we should be doing to keep it fresh and keep it different. That's what Greg Mayles from Rare said to 1UP back in May of 2008 before Trouble in Paradise would launch. It's not downright dismissing the potential of another game, but it definitely doesn't give you reassurance that there would be another game. Unless there was something that they overlooked or something that they didn't get to do that was high enough on a level to give them a reason to take another look and jump back into the world of Viva Piñata, it just seemed like Rare was basically done, being satisfied with both the final releases coming just a few months after this interview. Microsoft, for all of their parading around of how important this franchise is and really wanting to make it work from the jump, felt like maybe the series had run its course. It wasn't selling at the numbers that they were hoping to see it at, with Party Animals taking such a big dip that whatever Trouble in Paradise and Pocket Paradise would sell probably wouldn't be enough to fix things or get them back on track. Sure, they followed every bit of the formula possible to kind of be like a Pokemon, you know? Trying to launch this idea as a full-on franchise, one that was filled with a whole bunch of cool and colorful creatures to meet and collect, but despite how good the majority of the games were and how well they were mostly received, the other aspects of this quote-unquote franchise didn't have the same love and care. And even in some cases, like licensing deals for merch and all those extra other avenues, well, they never came to fruition. There was also the thought of the TV show itself being a contributing factor as to why the video game series didn't get to thrive, with the show not really representing the game and what it was really all about. Plus, if you didn't like the show, why would you try the game that is based off of it, right? Now, I know you're saying what we already know. The game wasn't based off the show. But how would the target audience know that back in 2006? They see a show, learn what it's all about, and then see a game months later with the same name and same looking characters on the cover of it. Of course there was going to be a bit of confusion there. And if you didn't enjoy the show, which seemed to be the main consensus of thoughts on the series overall, then of course you aren't going to be looking at the game. In the end, this is just a big learning lesson for Microsoft, as well as any other company who had tried or planned on trying to instantly launch a franchise. If it doesn't happen in an organic way, or if you try to force it all at once to be a thing, then it probably won't be a thing, regardless of how great something is or not. Organically, it should have been Viva Piñata as a one-off game, at least to start things off, and let the quality of it speak for itself to bring in a real audience, and then you slowly start trying new things like a spin-off game. Maybe not this one, how about the DS one? And then if things are doing great and you're killing it, now we get into discussing what a TV show could look like. I'm not saying I know how to do business or to launch a franchise better, I clearly don't, or I would have done just that, you know? All I'm saying and expressing here is what I've seen and grew up experiencing firsthand. I like Viva Piñata. Many people like, if not love, Viva Piñata. And in 2025, we can see that over the past decade, especially the last 5 years, these cozier simulation-like games are bigger than ever. People are obsessed with them. People are streaming them with their audiences getting to participate in the experience. The collectibles market for plushies and figures surrounding them, and so much more for all of this stuff is now at an all-time high. So if there was any better time to possibly try something new with Viva Piñata, now would be that time to give it a go once more. Both because the gameplay is fun, and you can do so much more now with it, I'm sure, as well as, and say it with me everyone, nostalgia. The nostalgia for something like Viva Piñata is at its all-time prime peak moment for the series to make a comeback. In 2026, Viva Piñata will be 20 years old. All I am saying to Microsoft and Rare, or whoever could go in and work on this game for Rare if they're too busy and or not interested, is to just take a look at the gaming space and where it is now, and do with that information what you will. I would love to see something more come from the Viva Piñata IP. Obviously, we did get to see both of the main games make a bit of a resurgence a decade ago thanks to the release of Rare Replay that featured both games as a part of that collection. Plus, in 2019, they got 4K resolution updates, so hopefully it just means that they haven't forgotten about the series and can understand that there is space for it. The community around the franchise is extremely wholesome, and heck, someone early on after the game came out used it to create a proposal for his future wife, since they both enjoyed playing the game together. Speaking of the fans, they really said if Microsoft isn't going to make it, then we'll try and do it ourselves some way, with it being called Return to Paradise, where they have put some extensive work into making their own pretty faithful version of what they would have wanted to see the proper evolution of the franchise become by now. You can go and check all of this out on their Steam page and learn how to help support it if you'd like. Could there be a future for Viva Piñata? Maybe. I think now is the right time, whether it comes officially from the studio or unofficially from diehard fans of the games. I am sure there are plenty of amazing new ideas, piñatas, and gameplay styles that can breathe new life into what had come before. At the bare minimum, why not an app on my phone that works just like Pocket Paradise? You know what, on second thought, don't do that. I already know how quickly that would be ruined with microtransactions. But for now, that's the rise and fall of Viva Piñata, so here's my final message to Microsoft. Look, much like a real-life piñata, sometimes you swing and you miss, but that doesn't mean you give up. There's still delicious candy in there. So pick back up that bat, be confident, and take another swing. Or something. I don't know. I'm not an inspirational speaker. I'm a YouTuber. Anyway, please let me know all of your thoughts on Viva Piñata. Share with me any memories that you may have with the franchise, as well as if you'd want to see it come back. Tell me all of that and more in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like on this video and to subscribe for more videos like this coming soon. But until then, later.